This is a beautiful feast on the Catholic calendar. It is the patroness of all the Americas, North America, Central America, South America. On Saturday, we celebrate the feast of Juan Diego, St. Juan Diego, Saturday, December 9th. And I was doing some research on Juan Diego and, of course, Our Lady of Guadalupe. And I find it interesting that the apparition of Mary to Juan Diego was in the year 1531. Now, we know that Christopher Columbus led a crew of Spaniards and Portuguese to what they called the New World in 1492. That's just 39 years before this apparition appeared. Now, again, sometimes we say Christopher Columbus discovered the New World. No, the New World was already here. It didn't need to be discovered. And they weren't Mexicans or Americans. They were indigenous peoples or native to these two continents and the Central America connecting the two continents. And yet already there was a strong Spanish influence, and Juan Diego apparently spoke his own dialect and the Spanish language. And it's amazing, the beautiful story. I'm sure most of you have heard this. He was walking actually to take care of an uncle who was very sick, and all of a sudden this beautiful image appeared to him, and it was an image of Mary, as you see on the screens there, in typical colors of that part of Mexico. And she asked him to have a church built on that site, and he went to see the local bishop. So they already had a bishop there appointed, again, less than 40 years after the Europeans came to the New World. And the bishop often, as often is the case, didn't believe Juan Diego was telling the truth. They thought he was making up a story or imagining or somehow had some, something going on. And so he said, I want some proof. Similar to the stories of Bernadette, when she saw Our Lady of Lourdes, they didn't believe her for a while. Same thing, the three children of Fatima, they didn't believe them for a while either. And it's interesting how God often chooses, very ordinary people, very kind of maybe less than ordinary people, not leaders of the church, not scholars, not people with huge IQs, not people highly educated or influential or wealthy, but often poor young people to get the message to the world. So that was the case of Juan Diego. The bishop asked for a sign, so he went back to the place, and Mary appeared again. And she said, take these roses. It was December 12th. And in that part of Mexico, on the top of a mountain, of course, roses would not be growing in that cold, frigid weather. But he took roses and he wrapped them up in a cloak called a tilma, somewhat like the cassock that I'm wearing, kind of wrapped them up like that to carry them off to the bishop. And when he came to the bishop, he unfolded his tilma, and the roses fell, and on the tilma was that beautiful image there. And I think I've heard, again, the bishop fell to his knees and believed that Juan Diego was telling the truth, and they began immediately to make a shrine there. Beautiful, beautiful story. I've had the privilege of visiting Lourdes in the Basque counties of southern France, of visiting Fatima in Portugal, and of visiting Guadalupe near Mexico City. And all three have been very, very inspiring to me. If you've been to Mexico City, right near the city is Guadalupe, with a hill called Tepeyac. It's a beautiful, magnificent basilica. I mean, it must hold larger than this church, I think, but pretty large, and the image of Mary is on a wall covered with glass, so it can be damaged by people who would do horrible things like that. And you because so many pilgrims want to pass by, you stand actually on a moving conveyor belt, as it were, and it moves very slowly, so you can spend 3 or 4 or 5 minutes in front. Of course, you could come back and get in the line again. Very beautiful. And pilgrims from all over the world, many of them walking on their knees from what we call the street all the way through the large plaza and so on, all the way up to the shrine itself. So a wonderful, wonderful experience. I was privileged to celebrate Mass there at that shrine. I think the example is that Mary wanted to talk to the people of the New World, at least what Europeans called these two continents, saying, I want you to love my son. I want you to know my son. So obviously, many of the native people living here, the indigenous folks, they were converted by missionaries from all over Europe, mainly from Spain and Portugal, but also there were French missionaries as well to these Americas. And they brought the Christian religion to them, and it's still very strong today. I would say probably the continent of South America is probably the most Catholic continent of all six. I'm not sure about the penguins down in Antarctica. But certainly South America is a Latin country, and it's a beautiful country. I've only had the privilege of going in South America to Peru, and in Central America to Costa Rica and Mexico. So we should be very proud that God sent his Mother Mary to come to this world so early on after the European adventures here, where they brought so many of their peoples here and so on. All of us, most of us are immigrants, unless you actually can trace your ancestry to an indigenous people here in the Americas. I believe it was 1981, that would be 450 years after the apparition, that the LA Times asked to do a study of this tilma, this cloak here, and they wanted to do x-rays of it. And they did. And first of all, about the tilma itself, it's never faded. It's as colorful and beautiful and bright as it was 480 years ago. And they have no idea where the pigment came from to make these paintings. And obviously Juan Diego was not an artist. So I truly believe it's a miraculous piece of art put on his cloak. But interestingly enough, 450 years after this cloak was found on Juan Diego's tilma, the LA Times examined, and they blew up different parts just to look at. When they blew up Mary's eyes, they look a little bit closed in that image today, but they're actually kind of about half open. When they blew up her eyes, they saw in one eye a reflection of someone standing in front of Mary. And they realized that was a reflection of Juan Diego standing in front of Mary. And that to me proves that this is authentic. If it was a fraud, I think the author would have said 450 years ago, by the way, look in the eyes, see what I did there? No. And so beautiful. So to me, it's a beautiful testament of faith. But again, the main message is not to adore that image, as beautiful as it is, not even to adore Mary, as I said at Sunday's Mass. The only ones we truly adore, of course, are the Trinity, Father, Son, and Spirit. But Mary is the mother of Jesus Christ. So I've come to this part of the world, this part of the planet Earth, to dedicate North America, South America, Central America to my son, Jesus Christ. May he reign. That's always been a beautiful cry of Spanish-speaking people throughout the Americas. Viva Cristo Rey, Viva Cristo Rey, long live Christ the King. So that's our message tonight. Let us listen to Mary. You know, one of the great things, stories I love about Mary, right out of the Bible, is the wedding feast of Cana. When they ran out of wine, and she felt sorry for this poor couple who was getting married. How embarrassing to run out of wine. So she went to the waiters, and she pointed to her son Jesus, and she said, do whatever he tells you. He told them to fill those 6 water jars with water and change them into wine. That's what Mary tells us today. Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe. Do whatever Jesus tells you to do. What would Jesus tell us to do? He would tell us to love God above all things. He would tell us to love our neighbor, and especially those who live on the margins. And that's the main message of Papa Francisco. He keeps saying over and over again, bring those in the margins, bring those on the outside, bring them into the church, that all be welcome. No one should be left out of the embrace of Jesus Christ. So as we celebrate this great fiesta today, let us remember, Mary wants us to bring the love of her son to everyone we meet. We honor Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe, and our cry is Viva Cristo Rey.